So, Rachel, on this video, we're going to be talking about your particular approach to quoting and some hacks and some tips on how people can quote more effectively, because we know that that is one of the major hiccups. It's a barrier. It's stressful. It's fear, and yet it is the critical key that enables people to get the job. So, tell us firstly your thoughts about quoting. Why do we feel these ways? Why do we find it so debilitating?
I think that we are generally, especially when we're new to the job, new to copywriting or new to freelancing, we're really nervous about talking about money. And that's because perhaps we haven't had to negotiate, in a business sense. We might have been in a permanent job where you didn't have to do that. You just did your work and got on with it. But it's a really important skill. And I think even though we can shy away from it, you really should run towards it, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes, until you can basically talk about money, anytime, anywhere. You have no problem whatsoever, asking people about their budget or anything. And that's the point that I'm at, which is really a nice place to be,
Yeah.
because
And
otherwise you're
and
sweating, aren't you?
totally. And all those years of doing it, you've come to this place. And I think it's a bit like, I think it was Michael Jordan said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
And because we pull back from quoting, because we don't want to talk about that, you miss out on the job. And often talking about the money quickly, early in the process is important. There might be something you talk about too, because you qualify them. Now, if they've only got a budget for 500 and you're saying 5,000, they're never going to pick you.
Yeah.
And there's always room for negotiation, of course, but it pays to get that discussion done quickly, rather than, and this is what I did in the early stages of my career. I'd have meetings before, Zoom. I'd go out and meet people, buy them coffee, spend an hour giving them free content and free, advice. And then at the end, they just couldn't afford it. So I think, and also it's about worth, isn't it, too? It's not just about fear of not knowing. It's like, what am I worth? Do I deserve this? Do I think I can deliver? So I think there's a lot wrapped up in quoting that's a lot deeper than what we might anticipate. But over to you. What tips have you got over your career that you found useful?
Well, as I said, like, the more that you quote, the easier it gets. And the more projects that you've worked on, the more you get a sense of what things cost and what to charge for different things. And that's all really important as well. When I'm doing copywriting jobs, because I do a mixture of things, but when I'm doing copy jobs, I quote based on the project scope rather than an hourly or a word rate, which is very much more for journalism. So project scope, I think we can also fall into that. People ask us to quote on an hourly rate or a day rate. So, that's okay. If you are working with an agency and they want your day rate, that might be something that you just give them. But if you're working with a small client or a small business or something and they give you a project scope, you definitely want to quote based on that. And in order to do that, you need to know your internal rate. And that mine is anywhere between 100 to 150 an hour, depending on what it is and who it is. If it's a really small business and I want to help them out and I love the idea of what they're doing, I might bring it back to that $100 an hour. But if it's a big blue chip, I'll go up accordingly. So I'm just thinking about leads. They come to me in various ways. They might come to me via a Calendly link on my site, but actually I'm really hating Calendly. I'm going to get rid of it. I'd much prefer people just contacting me and I'm putting them into my schedule. So
That's interesting.
It works better for me than having this automated thing where someone goes, you now have a meeting with someone at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. I'm like, oh no, I've got something at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. So anyway, that's just me. I'm weird that way. So they come via that, or they come via email on my website. But often, and this is just as an aside, why you need a Google My Business listing. So many leads come via my Google My Business listing, and they will just ring me. They'll just pick up the phone and ring.
Talk us through that, Rach. Why does that happen?
I guess it's because the more, the more testimonials you have, the more you post to your Google My Business listing, you treat it literally like another social media platform. Anytime you post something on Instagram or LinkedIn, put it on your Google My Business listing as well. And Google loves that, and it moves you up the rankings. And when someone, I rank for copywriter lifestyle, or no, copywriter Sydney. I rank for copywriter Sydney. So anytime someone says, I want a copywriter in Sydney, I will pop up. And the more your Google My Business listing is current and fresh, the more higher that you'll pop up, I assume. That's my that's
Right.
my belief.
Good.
And so a lot of people who approach me, they don't want to send an email, they don't want to go to my website, they will just pick up the phone and ring me. And it's usually tradies or businessmen who just aren't used to email anyway.
Just on that, Rach, and this is a little bit of an aside as well, because it's actually an interesting topic. What if you don't have an address, you know, that you
like
don't...
a website?
Yeah, or just you don't have that yet. Is that a problem?
Do you still have a Google My Business listing? I actually don't know. I'm sure you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But that
Let's
would be
keep going.
something to worth checking out, because
Yeah.
even if you're working on your website, you don't have a domain yet or anything, and that's all in the works, at least get a Google My Business listing if you can.
Okay.
But maybe it does need to be linked to your domain. That's something to check.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So keep going.
Okay.
Yes.
So
That's where your leads come from.
Yeah. So a lot of people just ring me on the fly and it's like, hi, I'm looking for a copywriter to write my website. And it's like, okay. And if it's a call like that, I will, as you say, qualify them a little bit, ask them some questions. Do they want an about page? Are they looking for a full 5-pager website? How much copy do they want? Do they want it SEO optimized? All of that sort of stuff. So we'll discuss what I call a rough job spec. And if they're not really sure, I will say, well, look, I'm going to send you my client questionnaire and you fill it out for me. And it outlines things like, what are you trying to achieve with this project? Do you want more traffic? Are you looking for more customers? Are you looking to become a bit of an expert in your field? What's the goal for this copy? And it also asks them, what's your budget? Which is a great way of getting out having to ask that question yourself. And it also forces someone who is a little bit, kind of not sure, hasn't got their ducks in a row, it forces them to really think about it and write it all down for you. If they don't fill that out, then, you just move on, basically.
Yeah. That's in a way a source of qualifying itself, isn't it? If they don't send it back, they weren't serious anyway.
No, that's right.
Great. Nice.
So and then I use for notes, I use the Remarkable, a paper tablet, which is fantastic because you can take notes, you can turn it into text and email it to yourself, or you can just keep all your notes in the cloud and use that
Just
later.
talk us through that program. I'm not familiar with it.
It's not a program, it's a device, it's a paper tablet. So you can't browse the internet or anything, but it is connected to Wi-Fi and it has a stylus. And so you can just take notes on it. It's like writing on paper.
Oh, what's it called again?
The Remarkable.
Oh, the Remarkable. I've never heard of it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like the size of an iPad, you were saying.
It's a bit bigger. It's about a little bit less than an A4. Yeah.
Okay. And
but
so you write
cool
with a stylus and then it converts it into text.
You can convert it into text, or you can email your notes to yourself, your scribbled notes to yourself, or it's really interesting because it's a great way of, keeping meeting notes, or journaling, or also you can bring PDFs into it. So you can annotate PDFs. I also have you can put things in folders for different clients. I've got a bills folder. So I move all my bill PDFs into this folder and then I just mark them off when they're paid. And
you are a nerd, aren't you?
I'm a massive nerd. So anyway, I highly recommend checking out the Remarkable. It's not cheap, but it really is a brilliant, brilliant tool.
Wow, good to hear. Okay.
Yeah. So I take all my notes on that. And then as we mentioned before, it's so, so, so important to get a sense of how much money they have. What is their budget? Really, really early on in that first phone call, in that first email exchange. Don't waste time. You could go down a rabbit hole for weeks and it's just a waste of your time and they might not be serious anyway.
One of the things I hear, and I've experienced myself too, Rachel, is how do you know what the client wants if they don't know what they want? Yeah. How do you manage that? Because you can't quote on something you don't know how long it's going to take or the scope. So what questions do you ask that you find get to the hub of that very quickly?
I know that a lot of copywriters won't even go there with those clients. They want them to come with a fully formed project scope. But I'm a little bit different. I'm often being contacted by small businesses who really don't know anything about copywriting, digital marketing. They don't know how a website works. They have no idea about SEO. they're not sure, like they think one blog post is going to move the needle. They just don't even know about a content strategy. And so I will often talk them through in a very basic way these things that you kind of need to, if you are looking to move the needle, if you're looking to rise up in Google, if you're looking to, you know, appear in the right searches, all of that sort of stuff. And they're like, right, okay. So yeah, I will help them a little bit with that. But if that becomes a bigger thing, like I had a client recently who was starting a parenting website, and she wasn't even sure what she needed. She knew she needed content, but she wasn't sure all the different facets of what she needed. She didn't have any content pillars in place, which is, you know, like categories that you want to write under, but she knew she needed some. So I said, how about we do a strategy session and then you can decide if you want to move further. So we actually sat down and nutted out all of her content pillars. We did a whole strategy on, you know, the copy that she needed for her site and sort of an ongoing thing. And anyway, she hired me to execute it all. So often the strategy is also a way, the strategy session is also a way to get to know that person, for them to get to know you, to see if you have a good rapport and would be a good fit working together. But
and that's a paid session?
Yeah, you should charge for it.
Yeah,
definitely. So, but sometimes they will have a vague idea. A builder that I recently picked up as a client, and this was like one of those long and involved situations where you do the call and they say, I definitely want to work with you. He came to me via a web designer who I have a sort of loose association with. He sends me clients who need copy, and then he creates the website for them once I've done the copy. So he was someone, he rang the web designer first and he said, listen, I want a website. I don't need any more work, but I know I need some kind of website for people to check me out. And the guy said, well, go to Rachel first, talk to her about your copy first, and then come back to me. So he rang me, wanted all of this. And in the course of that first discovery call, he told me he didn't want this, he didn't want SEO, he didn't want too many inquiries. He just wanted essentially a digital footprint where people could check him out. And we talked about the importance of that and what he needed on there in order for people to, you know, say, yep, this is the builder I want to hire. And he was really lovely. Anyway, he just dropped off the face of the earth for 3 months. But in that call, I said, what is your budget? Have you got a budget for this project? He said, I don't even know what this kind of thing costs. And you will hear that over and over. And it's, you know, they're not playing games. Most of the time they don't know what it costs. So what I will say is, initially I'll say, have you got a budget for this project? And if they say yes, you know, it's $1,000 or it's this or whatever. And they've already told me a bit about the scope. I will sort of at that point say, I think your scope is probably too large for the allocated budget. So, you know, this is what I could do for $1,000, and you sort of like, so you kind of, you know, give them a dose of reality, I suppose, in terms of the budget. And if they are really hemming and hawing, they don't want to give you a budget, you say, look, even a rough guide for this project will help me see if I'm a good fit for you. And maybe I'm not, but let's go there. If they really don't know, I say, okay, I worked on a similar project to yours and that cost the client $2,500. Does that sound like it's in the ballpark for you? Because this is what you're looking at. So, and as I mentioned before, I have no problem talking about money. I've been on, you know, quoting conversations with people where I knew that their project scope, they were looking at 20 to 30K for that project. And I would say, you are looking at $20,000 to $30,000. Is that in the ballpark? You know, a lot of people run screaming at that point.
Their eyes roll back into their heads.
Yeah. But it's really important to not shortchange yourself out of fear that you're not going to get the job. You know, if this is what it costs, this is what it costs. You just lay it out for them.
Yeah.
And if they trust you, they have the money, you know, there's a likelihood that they'll go ahead.
Yes. Rach, I've seen that myself over the years, and every time I do that, take something and I'm not happy with the fee, I 100% regret it. I get into it and I feel resentful, and I feel I I do the good job, right? I do the best I can, but I don't give it my heart, you know, because I'm thinking and it's my fault. It's completely my fault. I'm not holding them responsible, but I know when I do charge the right fee, I give my all, you know, and I'm really happy to do extras and all sorts of stuff because there's goodwill.
Yeah.
But when there's not, it's like, how can I get out of this as quickly as I can? You know?
It's so true that that resentment just settles in like a dark cloud from the start, doesn't it? It kind of permeates the whole project. So it is really important.
Do you think, I get this asked by a lot of new students, new copywriters, should they take a job even when they know it's not going to be very well rewarded for the effort they put in? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, we've all been there, haven't we? You've got to start somewhere. Everyone has to start somewhere. And we've all, in the beginning, taken projects that were not well paid just to get that run on the board.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I say this to Rachel's List people all the time, you know, if you're going to do that, if you're going to, I really don't advocate working for free, but I also think if you're starting out and you need a byline somewhere, or you need someone who's going to give you a testimonial, maybe 1 or 2 jobs where you kind of do it, maybe even as a barter system or something, just to get that run on the board, can be valuable. But then you don't let that go on, you know, you immediately move to paid work. And it's the same with copywriting. When you're starting out, you always want to be moving up the value ladder, raising your prices incrementally. Every new client, you're raising your prices again until you get to a level that you feel is really worth your skills. For sure.
Love that. Cool. What else do you advocate?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm on the discovery call with them. I'm taking copious notes on the remarkable, and then at the end I'll recap the project scope and see if that's what they're after. And if they say, yep, that sounds about right, yep, okay, I've already given them an idea. This is also really important, why you want to get that idea of the budget in that discovery call or in that initial email, because you don't want to say, hey, that sounds awesome, I'll send you over a quote, because they'll have an absolute heart attack when they get a quote for $3,000 and they were thinking it would be $500. You want to set the expectation early, so that when they get the quote, it's not a surprise. You've already discussed the project scope, you've already given them a rough idea of what they're up for. Okay, so then I do an itemized quote in Rounded, which is my accounting package. And I'll send that to the client. Rounded has a really great function where if the quote is accepted, it turns it into an invoice automatically in the program. So I love that. And also it lets you create deposit payments. And I'm sort of at the stage now where I'm often working, I do have anchor clients that I work for over and over again, but I often work with new businesses and new clients who I don't know. And so I do a commencement fee on every job. And depending on the level depending on the budget and how big that job is, it might be a 50% upfront fee, or it might be 25% or that sort of thing. And the other thing that I do on a quote is if the job is really a rush job, I charge a rush fee as well of 25%. And I tell the client that, so it's built into the job. Wonderful. And and then once the quote is accepted and the commencement fee is paid, I lock them into my schedule. But if they don't accept the quote, I follow up. I don't just think, oh, it was too much, I'm just going to let that one go. I just follow up. Because
how do you do that?
I'll just email them and say, hey, you know, just wondering if you got the quote. Did you want to, oh, that's right. I will say, did you want to lock time in my schedule? I have a spot left coming up in November. I can commence this on the 7th of August. You know, like I give them a specific date. I say, I've only got one spot left. I create, you know, a little bit of FOMO, if you want, just to sort of lock them in. And that's what I did with the builder. I said, listen, I can lock you in on the 7th of August. We can have the first big interview for your website copy. And then I'll have first drafts to you within 2 weeks. And he said, great. Excellent. So it sometimes does do the trick. just saying, look, I'm booked up, but I can lock you into X. And they're like,
Yes.
oh, I'm gonna miss out if I don't
Yes.
go forward.
How frequently do you follow up if they don't get back to you?
I would probably follow up twice, but I've had a couple of big jobs this year. Not big jobs, but big leads come through who wanted a lot. And it was a big project scope. We talked about budget. We talked about all this stuff. I did the quote and then they just completely disappeared. And yeah, it's always weird when that happens because you might have talked to that person for 20 minutes or half an hour on the phone and they were really lovely and you kind of got this rapport, and then for them to not even say no, or something I've learned as a writer over the years is a lot of people just cannot handle any confrontation of any kind. They just can't handle even saying no, I don't want to do that anymore, I've changed my mind. So I give them 2 chances and then I just go away.
Their loss.
But there are a lot of copywriters that have, for the sake of argument, will keep those people in a folder or in a file, and then when times are slow they'll come back to them and use this one line. It's something I put in the wrap up a while ago, and I tried it myself. It is quite effective. Like if you went back to someone who had ghosted you or someone who didn't want to go ahead with the quote, and you just said, hi Nancy, any interest on doing that white paper? I've got some space in my schedule in November. And just that one line can sometimes just get people over the line. They think, well, actually, I am in a good place to do that. I do have the budget for that now. So that's an option to keep those follow-up people that did ignore you, give them some time and then 3 months later go back.
And often I think copywriters take it personally, and I certainly have too, where you go, it's me, it's the fee, it's whatever. And the reality is, someone could have died in their life. They got divorced or their kid was sick or they lost their job or, they got a new boss or the budget got cut. I mean, there's a ton of reasons why things don't go ahead, and yet we often sheet it back to us, which, sort of chips away at your confidence. So it's important to recognize that it's often not about you, the copywriter, it's about them.
Absolutely. You could have that like plastered on the top of your computer. You don't know what's going on in anyone else's life. You just don't. So I agree.
Rachel, that was absolutely outstanding. And I just so appreciate the years of experience that you've had in building up that knowledge and those templates and those strategies. It's really valuable to hear it, because I think it's hearing from someone who's been there, done that, that's very valuable, because they can say, well, it's not me, this is the way it is, and not take it personally. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.